The world does not end in flames, it ends in noise, in rush, in a silence so polluted that it can no longer be heard. It ends in the quiet collapse of human presence beneath the weight of endless tasks, glowing screens, and the race for more that nobody questions anymore. And perhaps the most terrifying truth is that we do not notice the ending while it happens. We scroll through it, we shop through it, we hurry through it, as if sprinting through our own extinction could somehow save us. The world ends when a person becomes a shadow behind their own routines, and when the heart forgets the sound of stillness. It ends when we mistake exhaustion for purpose and distraction for life. The end is subtle, almost elegant in its cruelty. A civilization dissolving while pretending to be thriving, and we, who should be the guardians of our own presence, become prisoners inside the very comforts we created. The world ends when time becomes a luxury and not a birthright. When days feel disposable, traded for possessions that promise happiness but deliver emptiness wrapped in plastic. When ambition mutates into addiction and the pursuit of more becomes a spiritual drought. The world ends when children inherit speed before wisdom, noise before meaning, and abundance before gratitude. We were taught to chase everything except ourselves, to fill every space except the one inside us. And so we drown in excess of choices, of desires, of obligations, yet starve in essence. We built towers of progress so tall that they blocked our view of the sky. We constructed digital kingdoms and forgot the kingdom of the moment. And as our pockets grew heavier, our souls grew thinner. This is how the world ends, not with an asteroid, but with a calendar so full that there is no room left for a single breath of awareness. The world ends when convenience becomes more important than consequence, when we buy what we do not need to impress people we do not know, while ignoring the planet that makes our existence possible. The end hides in the overflowing drawers, the overstuffed closets, the trash bags filled with forgotten impulses. It hides in the illusion that ownership equals identity and that abundance equals success. But the more we accumulate, the less we inhabit ourselves. The weight of things crushes the lightness of being, and yet we cling to objects as if they were life rafts, even when they pull us deeper into the waters of distraction. We are rich in things and poor in time, connected on screens, but severed from life, free to buy but enslaved to desire. This is the quiet apocalypse. A world ending not because it must, but because we refuse to live in it fully. The world ends when attention dies. When the mind fractures into 1,000 notifications and the soul becomes a forgotten tab in the browser of our existence. When slowness becomes suspicious and silence becomes unbearable. The end arrives disguised as efficiency, productivity, optimization, words that sound noble but often strip us of our humanity. We have mistaken activity for meaning, speed for progress, restlessness for ambition. And the more we chase, the more we forget why we started running. Anxiety becomes the anthem of modern life, and burnout becomes its altar. This is how the world ends, when we lose the ability to be here now, when presence becomes a rare and endangered species, when people sleep with their phones and wake up with their fears, when the inner world collapses long before the outer one ever needs to. The world ends when truth becomes negotiable, when comparison becomes a daily ritual and worth becomes a digital currency. When we build identities out of pixels and expect them to hold the weight of our longing. The end whispers through curated perfection, filtered happiness, and the quiet despair of lives performed instead of lived. We scroll through other people's dreams while abandoning our own. We measure our value in likes, strangers' impressions, and algorithms none of us understand. And while we project strength, we crumble inside, quietly, politely, invisibly. We were promised connection. We received addiction. We were promised freedom. We became data. This is how the world ends. in the subtle corrosion of authenticity, in the erosion of intimacy, in the loss of the courage to be human without mask or performance. The world ends when we lose our sense of the sacred, not in temples or rituals, but in the simple miracles we have forgotten. The breath, the sunrise, the silence between thoughts. When nature becomes an aesthetic instead of a home, when we treat the earth as a warehouse instead of a mother. The world ends when we forget how to listen to the wind, how to walk without hurry, how to sit without needing to escape ourselves. It ends when the soul becomes a stranger we no longer greet. And yet, amid this quiet devastation, we continue searching for meaning in all the wrong places. Shopping malls instead of forests, feeds instead of feelings, ambition instead of awareness. We have replaced the sacred with the urgent and the essential with the visible. And so the world ends, not through destruction, but through forgetfulness. But the world also begins again in simplicity, in a single breath taken consciously. In the moment you decide to step out of the noise and listen to the trembling truth inside you. The world is reborn when you put down what was never yours to carry. When you release the weight of things that promised fulfillment but delivered fatigue. Simplicity is not the absence of abundance, it is the presence of meaning. It is the art of choosing what matters and letting the rest fall away. In a world drowning in excess, simplicity becomes a rebellion, a revolution without slogans, a quiet uprising of the soul. And in this rebellion, we rediscover ourselves, not as consumers, but as beings, not as performers, but as presences, not as machines of productivity, but as guardians of the sacred rhythm of existence. The beginning unfolds when you slow down, when you discover that speed is not life and silence is not emptiness, when you realize that the world does not ask you to run, it asks you to notice, to feel, to inhabit each moment as if it were both fragile and infinite. Slowing down is not laziness, it is intelligence. It is the refusal to let life pass by unnoticed. It is the courage to break the cycle of urgency that has hypnotized the modern mind. And in the slowing, things begin to shift. The heart softens, the mind clears, the soul awakens. The simple becomes profound. A cup of tea becomes a ceremony. A sunset becomes scripture. Breathing becomes prayer. And in this stillness, we remember what we were never meant to forget, that life is not measured in achievements, but in awareness. The world rebuilds itself within you when you choose presence over performance, when you choose depth over display, when you remember that nothing you can buy will ever replace what you can feel. And the more you return to the center of your being, the more the world begins to look different, softer, slower, more alive. You begin to see that the apocalypse we fear is not the one unfolding around us, but the one unfolding within us when we live unconsciously. And the salvation we seek is not in survival plans or digital escapes, but in returning to the simplest and most radical truth. You are here, and being here is enough. It always was. The world ends and begins every day, in every choice, in every breath. The question is not whether you are prepared for the end of the world. The question is whether you are prepared for the beginning of yours. A beginning rooted in simplicity, in awareness, in the courage to live differently from a society drowning in its own noise. The revolution is not loud. It is not public. It does not trend. It begins quietly, inside the heart that chooses to wake up. The heart that chooses to release what is heavy and embrace what is real. And so the new world rises not from the ashes of catastrophe, but from the stillness of clarity. You do not need to wait for the world to end. You only need to begin again. And when you choose simplicity, presence, and truth, you do.